Retro.
Are you an aspiring Jedi, or do you dabble with the dark side of the Force?
Regardless of whether you fancy yourself a defender of the light or an aspiring Sith Lord, you're going to need a lightsaber.
Podcast Stardust is pleased to partner with Saber Masters, the creators of high-quality, durable, and affordable lightsabers.
Saber Masters is preparing to launch the Ultimate Lightsaber 2.0, and right now you can get 2 for the price of 1.
So, check out the link in our show notes and go get your Ultimate Lightsabers from Saber Masters.
And don't forget to use our referral code Stardust to save $10 at checkout.
And each purchase using our referral code helps support Podcast Stardust.
Hey, this is Lauren Mary Kim, and I'm the stunt double for Ahsoka Tano in Clone Wars and the armorer in The Mandalorian. You're listening to Dennis and Jay on Podcast Stardust. This is the way.
Welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And our series celebrating the 25th anniversary of the Phantom Menace continues in this episode. But before we dive into that, Jay, I want to remind everybody where we can be found around the internet.
My pleasure as always, Dennis. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and X conveniently at Podcast Stardust.
All right, this is a line. The signal is boosted to maximum output. The shield is down. We are now broadcasting to the galaxy. So if you're a new listener to Podcast Stardust, each year we break down one of the Star Wars movies on a monthly basis in 10 to 15 minute segments. And we typically pick a movie that's celebrating an anniversary that ends in a 5 or a 0. And so this happened to be the 25th anniversary of the Phantom Menace. That is our feature movie this year. And we will be getting to the post-podrace scene here in just a second. We got a spectacular guest that is standing by. Jay, I think this is still like one of my favorite things that we do on this show is getting into these segments with all of our great guests.
Oh, by far. And it's also definitely one of those that I think gets the most attention from our listeners as well. So thank you out there, all of you that are tuning in once again, because we definitely have a great discussion for you.
So we are pleased to welcome back one of our favorite guests. You know him, you'll love him, from Coffee with Kenobi and Star Wars author Dan Zehr. Dan, welcome back to Podcast Stardust.
Hello, Dennis and Jay. Thank you both so much. This has become an annual tradition that I'm thrilled to be a part of. And plus, you can't go wrong with this movie.
Oh, absolutely. And it's always a joy to have you back. So welcome back to the table.
Well, thank you. Thanks for keeping my chair at the exact height I like so I can fit up at the table perfectly, ergonomically correct, as always.
Go. And we'll have to get your measurements for the Podcast Stardust gold jacket here.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully it's got brown patches on the elbows.
Hey.
An exclusive Podcast Stardust logo on the front. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, we'll get into the segment here in just a second, but we like to get a little bit about everyone's history with the Phantom Menace. And frankly, I already know the answers to some of these questions because you and I have talked about them before in other situations, Dan. But we'll start off so that everyone else can hear it. What can you tell us about your first experience seeing the Phantom Menace? You remember where you saw it, who you're with, and what your initial reaction was?
Yes, and yes, of course. This movie was such a big deal for all of us, as you both know very well, because of the incredible anticipation for it. I remember seeing Leonard Maltin on the last VHS iteration of the original trilogy before the special edition, interviewing George Lucas and him talking about working on prequels. And your mind explodes because we didn't have the internet, kids.
Mm-hmm.
We had World Book encyclopedias and newspapers and TV, Entertainment Tonight and Mary Hart and things like that. So that trailer comes out and it blows you away. And you see this guy has a double red lightsaber. Who is that? Oh my goodness. And you get so excited. And then I went to the midnight show. I did go to a midnight showing, but more on that in a second. I went to the midnight premieres at Toys R Us for the figures, and that was amazing. I subscribed to USA Today purely because every day they had a Star Wars nugget on their life section. So I would cut them out and I kept them in a scrapbook, and who knows what that scrapbook is now. And then I won tickets to see a midnight showing of the Phantom Menace because they weren't doing an official Phantom Menace thing for fans. So you had to win to get it. And I had to go. Are you kidding? I had to be one of the first people to see it, because what if it was spoiled for me? No surprise. I didn't want anything spoiled. And so I called the radio station, and it was a trivia question. What was the title that they filmed Return of the Jedi under to keep paparazzi away? And it was, Blue Harvest, Horror Beyond Imagination. I won.
Nice.
They got me the tickets. I went with my girlfriend at the time. And when I walked out of the theater, I sat in the car and I put on my seatbelt, and she said, "What do you think?" And I said, "I don't think I liked it." And I was so depressed. And I went home, and I was up all night staring at the wall, and then I somehow fell asleep. And I woke up, I thought, this is dumb. I'm glad I'm seeing it again. And I saw it twice. So I saw it 3 times the first 24 hours. And I ended up absolutely loving it. I think I saw it in the theater 14 times, including at a drive-in. And I love it. It's a great movie for what it is, and it's groundbreaking in its own way. And I have nothing but fond memories of it. I even like Jar Jar, and I've been fortunate to have Ahmad Best on the show twice. So pretty cool.
That is fantastic. I swear this is my favorite part of doing all of these breakdowns, is just getting to hear everybody's stories and everybody's anecdotes about their memories and whatnot. And it's just so cool. I just love that so much. And Dennis and I were just talking about the hype, how much we miss the hype around the movies, and just looking forward to, ooh, what is this and what does that mean? And so really hoping that we get some more Star Wars back in the theater very, very soon. So
That
did
would
you
be
get to
nice.
go? Yeah, oh yeah. Did you get to go back for the 25th anniversary in the theaters?
I didn't. I went when it was in 3D.
Mhm.
And then that week that it was out, I couldn't go because we were just very busy with school and all kinds of stuff. And Mason's baseball schedule was hectic. And I didn't get to go. And it was a bummer, but I am optimistic I will get another chance, because I really
There
want
you
to take
go.
him to see it. It's fun. It's fun for me with him and the older boys who are out of the house now, but they all loved Jar Jar too. So hearing them in the theater laugh at Jar Jar was really rewarding.
Aw, love that. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, I love that so much. So what is your favorite scene then from The Phantom Menace, if you had to pick just one?
Well, I can say what it isn't. And imagine how happy I was when I hit play, getting prepared for this segment, and knowing that it wasn't the pod race. Thank goodness. I liked the pod race fine, by the way. And if you watch the original VHS cut of it, that was the original pod race before they added in all that extra stuff, and it made it so much longer than it actually is. But of course, my favorite sequence is the Duel of the Fate sequence, because that's
Mm,
just spectacular. I still think I'm not a prisoner of the moment. I don't think that the lightsaber scenes in the Acolyte are the best. I like them; they're amazing. But the Duel of the Fates, that emotional impact that it had on the zeitgeist of film goers and fans of action, fans of Star Wars, cannot be overestimated,
mhm,
because it was spectacular. It was absolutely
mhm.
spectacular. And the build up to that, and the music, was just incredible. I still get goosebumps every time the blast doors open and Maul is standing there.
Oh yeah.
Amazing.
Oh yeah. Same, same. That's a good one.
All right. Last question we have before we get into the segment is, who is your favorite character in the Phantom Menace?
Oh, Qui-Gon Jinn. Easy.
Yeah.
So easy. He's a top 3 Jedi. Liam Neeson is extraordinary. His performance is exceptional. And he's got the quotes he uses, I still relate to my daily life, even today. Down
Mhm.
center on your anxieties, Dan Zehr, Obi-Wan Kenobi, whatever. Those are things that are so huge. He's just a terrific character.
Oh, I agree. And there's so many. I had a whiteboard in my classroom as well. I had a Star Wars quote of the day, and I had so many Qui-Gon quotes. So
Oh, that's fun. Star Wars
I'm right
quote of the
there
day. I
with
like
you.
that.
Yeah.
If we have some time at this end of this episode, I'm going to ask you some questions about Qui-Gon that we've been discussing as we've done this
Okay.
series.
Oh yes, I would love to hear Dan's take.
Yeah, well, if we don't, we're gonna
If
have
we
him
have
back
time.
on to discuss
Yes.
that because I think he'd be the ideal person to talk us through this. But anyway, all right, well, let's get into it. This segment starts at 1 hour, 10 minutes, and approximately 4 seconds, and runs to 1 hour, 22 minutes, and approximately 45 seconds. And it is post pod race, so don't worry, Dan. We looked out for you. We didn't even know it. It starts off with in the hangar. We see Rex Terrell being carried off on a stretcher by some bit droids over on the left after he crashed in the previous segment. Jar Jar is lifting up Anakin. There's some general celebration amongst this crew. Padme gives him a hug and tells him they owe him everything. And then, like all little boys, he does not want to be kissed by his mother, and so he's grunting as she is showering him with affection. And she tells him, "You have brought hope to those who have none." So, okay, not a fan of the pod race. I get that. That's fine. But this
It's not that I don't like it. It's just too long. It's just too long.
Sure.
Yeah.
But this notion about bringing hope to those who have none, that is something of a literary concept. And hey, we just happen to have a teacher that covers that. So what do you think about that?
I love it because it's got some massive socioeconomic relevance as well as culturally, because he is a slave in a very different context than we know it to be in the real world. But when you are in that situation where you have no agency, you have no control over your life or that of your loved ones, it's probably extremely hard to have hope. Extremely hard. The book James is a different retelling of Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, told from the perspective of Jim the slave, and that is a dynamite, powerful, haunting book that showcases the real horrors of real slavery. So this is a different kind of a slavery. Let's be clear on that. But the fact that you can give hope to people who don't have any control over their lives is really amazing, and it's something that I enjoyed looking at when I rewatched this for the show.
That's well said, definitely.
So Jay, do your boys not like it when you give them kisses on the cheek?
Oh, they always have. That's one thing I've always been spoiled about is that both of my boys are mama's boys, I guess you could say, in the best of ways.
Yes.
Yes, but Dan, to kind of springboard off of what you said too. I mean, it's also the typical underdog, that, oh my gosh, if this little boy can do this, then what could I do? And I always love a good underdog story anyways. So yeah, that's perfect.
All right. Well, then from there, we see Watto paying off all of the bets that he just lost. And Qui-Gon shows up and gets accused of swindling him. And speaking of Qui-Gon quotes, he says, whenever you gamble, my friend, eventually you'll lose. And he gives him instructions to bring the parts that he's won to the main hangar. And then he'll come by the shop later so Watto can release the boy. A Sith pro droid flies by in the background, and when Watto refuses to honor the bet, it wasn't fair. Qui-Gon says, "Hey, you want to take this up with the Hutts?" And Watto relents. Jay, I'll start with you on this one. What do you think about Watto here? Is this him just being a sore loser? Is this the gravity of the situation he's put himself into? What's your take?
I think a little bit of both, and also just the fact that I really do think that he had affection for Anakin, and we've talked about that in the past as well, that even though he had him as a slave, that he really did have that soft spot for him. And so I think that there's part of that as well. But, Watto also, I mean, as Qui-Gon said, eventually you'll lose. Well, he said, I lost everything. And so he really must have hit bottom at that point. So, do I feel bad for him? Not necessarily, but it's you can see the gravity of the situation for him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And how about you, Dan?
I have a different take on that. I've never thought of Watto as having any affection for anyone but himself and money. I think that Anakin is an incredible asset for him because of the things he's able to do with technology and with construction, and the fact that he's sort of like a great bartering piece for him to keep Anakin's mother Shmi around as well. So I think he looks at it purely from a transactional perspective. And he wants to cheat because he's probably not used to getting swindled. The thing that is the most challenging to me in this scene is when Qui-Gon says, "Why don't we take it up with the Hutts?" And he kind of puffs up a little bit, almost like to show, "Hey, if we're gonna fight one-on-one, buddy, I think you know how that's gonna end." And that is that's why Qui-Gon is a Maverick Jedi again. Before sort of us looking at the Jedi differently through the Acolyte series, there's an interesting change there that just sort of goes under the radar. I don't think it's a big deal or problem. Very similar to Luke using the Force to strangle his Gamorrean guards in Return of the Jedi, right? It's just a different way to present it. They are human. So I really like that touch because it shows that they're not infallible.
Mm-hmm. So Qui-Gon didn't do anything to help Anakin win the race. So there's no cheating or swindling going on there. But Qui-Gon and Anakin did conspire. They didn't tell Watto where they got the pod from. They came up with this way of getting what they wanted out of Watto without being completely truthful about it. And then later, Qui-Gon influences the dice roll so that he will get the slave he wants if Anakin wins. So Watto doesn't know any of this, but in a way, I mean, this is kind of the question we've been asking Dan. This Jedi ethics here. He's in a way kind of taking advantage of Watto. He tried to mind trick him when he first met him into taking credits that he didn't want to take in order to achieve, even though the ends may have been justified. The ends justify the means. So, what do you think about that?
I think it's very dishonest. Of course it is. It's something that's always intrigued me about him and about this film in particular, because he does manipulate. The end justifies the means because he believes, if he believes who Anakin is, who he says he is, then Watto shouldn't have that kind of power. So he is trying to liberate and free him. He can't really sit down with Watto and say, "Hey, just so you know, he's really powerful," because that's going to make Watto clench even more tightly. So it's not war, but it is an act that I think you can defend, because while he is being dishonest, there is a legitimate greater good. It's not for himself. Qui-Gon isn't doing these things for himself to give himself more power. He's trying to empower this boy to be the ultimate version of himself and getting him away from someone who would work Anakin until his dying days. So I think that justifies it personally.
Okay. And yes, Jay, I'm going to ask this of all of our guests going forward. This is the third episode in a row.
No, I think it's perfect. Yeah.
All right. Well, then we'll move on. We get back to the ship, and Qui-Gon, Padme, and Jar Jar have returned with the parts. Qui-Gon tells Obi-Wan that he's going back for some unfinished business, and Obi-Wan snarkily responds, "Why do I sense we picked up another pathetic life form?" And Qui-Gon says, "It's the boy who's responsible for getting us these parts." Jay, they've already got Jar Jar on this. Do you think Obi-Wan really had an issue with this, or is he just kind of tweaking his master?
Oh, I never thought he had an issue with it, because just the way that, you could just tell he was laughing it off. And so what it did for me was it made me want to know more about their relationship. And so, all of these years we've always wondered what kind of master and apprentice relationship they had, because obviously we saw very, very little of it in this movie until it came to such an abrupt and, horrible end. So, the types of media and things that we've gotten since then has really lent to that history. So it was always just very endearing to me. And I just love that about Obi-Wan, quite honestly.
Dan, we get very little Obi-Wan in this segment. So just while we've got him here in this segment, what do you think about Obi-Wan in The Phantom Menace?
I think Obi-Wan is in his 20s, and I think he's in the middle of a desert, and I think he's wearing robes, and I think he's just irritated. I think he's frustrated, and I think Jar Jar and others like him are grating on him, and it shows his delightful humanity. It's not very kind, but he's allowed us to slip up once in a while. I think that adds to make him a little more of a well-rounded character. It's still super snotty, and if he was my child, I'd be like, or my student, I'd be like, dude, no. But you roll it because, again, I wouldn't wear that in Tatooine. Are you kidding me? 2 sons? Whoa.
Indeed.
I don't care if it's made out of breathable linen. I mean, come on.
It's true.
It's a lot of clothes to wear in the desert.
Yeah,
Right?
then Shakespeare has a great thing in Romeo and Juliet about we better get inside because it's so hot, and we better run or we won't escape a brawl. So it just reminds me of that.
Nice.
Okay, so back at the Skywalker house, as they are walking inside, Qui-Gon gives Anakin the credits that he won from selling the pod. And then he breaks the news that Anakin has been freed, to which Shmi's response is, "That's so wonderful. Now he can make your dreams come true, Annie." And then Shmi asks Qui-Gon if Anakin's to become a Jedi. And basically, Qui-Gon lays that out before Anakin. It's his choice. He seeks some advice from his mother, and she says, "This is a path that's been laid out before you. This is your choice to make." Qui-Gon's advice about this is that it's, training's difficult and it's a hard life, but he's willing to take them. And from there, Anakin, what about mom? Asks about what about mom, and Qui-Gon says, "I'm sorry, but I couldn't free your mother. Watto wouldn't have it." And she reassures him by saying her place is here. And even though he doesn't want things to change, she says, you can't stop the changing more than you can stop the suns from setting. So Qui-Gon promises he's going to watch out for Anakin going forward. Dan, you're a parent. We're all parents here in this conversation here. And this is a big choice that Shmi lets Anakin make. An 8-year-old boy, about what he wants to do with the rest of his life and leave. Of course, it's needed for this epic saga that we're being presented with. But what do you think about that? Giving that type of a choice to someone so young?
I think that's in a real world application. I think it's a problem because your front cortex, right, or whatever, is not fully developed. But Star Wars has done this several times, where the person who is force sensitive or strong in the force has some autonomy and some choice over their lives. I know it's very, very different, but when all of our boys, when they're younger, there were certain choices that were more challenging than others. Not should you leave us and go join this religious cult of people with laser swords that wear robes in the desert, nothing like that. But there's some interesting things there, because they're showing we respect your opinion. Ultimately, you have to choose it. But I also am going to strongly encourage you to do that, because it is actually for your own good. You can get away from here. You can see the stars like you always wanted to do, and you've got so much potential. I want you to do it. So it's in the context of this mythology, it's lovely. It's really beautiful. I continually am impressed by Pernilla August as Shmi Skywalker. She's just so good, and she says so much with her eyes and her eyebrows and just her facial expressions and her countenance. And she sells for me, I love you, but I'm gonna kind of just I'm just gonna try to be more calm about this, because I don't think you quite realize that you'll probably never see me again. And that is just, as parents, again, that's just, I can't even fathom that. It's not like, well, we can FaceTime later, or, hey, we'll go to the beach sometime, or, well, whatever, we'll go to Disney World together. There's none of that. So it's really intriguing. I think I'm glad you didn't say, hey, do you think that Qui-Gon Jinn is knows Shmi Skywalker from before because he puts his arm on her shoulder and all this kind of stuff? Because no, I don't.
No.
I think he's compassionate. I've never subscribed to that. Is Qui-Gon actually the father? No, he's not.
Definitely not. Yeah, you bring some points there, and you're right. I mean, if we take this out of a real world context here and look at it for what it is, Star Wars is a great mythology when it comes down to it. And and then there's just look at it from the humanity. It's, we all need our kids to grow, spread their wings, and become who they're destined to be.
Right.
And I would not let my kids make that type of decision at 8 years old. But at some point they need to. They have to decide, when they're going to go, and they have to make their decisions and learn to live with the consequences and think things through. Now, it's not exactly like she let him just go join any gang of ruffians. I mean, it is
right.
The
exactly.
Jedi are the protectors of
not Hondo.
Yeah, in the galaxy. So there is that going for it. But Jay, do you have a take on this?
Well, again, as a parent, especially as a mom of boys, this really hits for me because I know at that age, I could never have let my 8-year-old make such a decision because honestly, again, in the real world, kids at the age of 8 are really not capable of doing something like that. I mean, he has this idea, he's has this hero worship of the Jedi and this ideal that he thinks he wants to do, but what is the reality of it? And then, I also think about being 8 years old, and of course, the child development teacher in me comes out, and I think of Erickson's 8 stages, and he's not really technically into identity versus role confusion just yet. I mean, he's still in that industry versus inferiority stage at the age of 8, but yet we've also talked about the fact that kids in Star Wars are very much ahead of their time. There are all these little prodigy kind of things, and Anakin obviously very much is. So, but I think for Shmi, she wanted him to have a better life. And had they not been slaves, maybe that decision would have been a lot harder for her to reconcile with seeing him go off. But in this way, it was giving him his best chance. And even though she kind of didn't want him to go, she also, I think, kind of did because she knew that that was going to be the best for him, overall. But I actually do have something that I've always wondered about in the fact that, Qui-Gon basically says, our meeting was not a coincidence. Nothing happens by accident. And he's done all of these things, as we've talked about, to make it so that Anakin was going to be able to go with him. He manipulated the chance cubes. He did all these different things to make it so that Anakin could go with him. So was there really a choice to be had? Dan, what do you think?
I do. It would have been interesting to see what happened if he said no. But I do think so. Yeah, I think they're both sincere people. They both legitimately want what is best for him. So yeah, I do.
So you really think he would have left well enough alone and been like, oh yeah, he's got midichlorians off the chart, but he says he wants to stay here.
What I think would have happened is he would have come back
Okay.
with maybe Yoda or something like that. Because we've never really seen something where someone refuses the call.
Right.
Thank you, Joseph Campbell. And refuses to train as a Jedi. I mean, it's I don't think they would have given up because they would have believed this is their guy. This is their savior, for lack of a better word. But I think in that moment, they wouldn't have just taken him. No, I don't think that at all.
And I put that out there almost to play devil's advocate as well, because I do believe that Qui-Gon, he does get down to his level and he says, it is a hard life. So he puts that into his head that it's not all going to be, glory and amazing, trips to the stars and battles with laser swords. It's a hard life. So he did give him kind of the choice.
Yeah,
well,
right.
He definitely gave him a choice, but I think at that point it was a fait accompli when it comes down. I mean,
really,
Anakin's been romanticizing the Jedi here. I saw your laser sword. No one can kill a Jedi. It's what I've always wanted. This entire long 8-year-old life. So I think I don't think there was much doubt in Qui-Gon's mind that he was going to take him up on that offer. So
okay.
All right. Well, let's move along. Anakin stops by his bedroom to pack up his collection of meager belongings. He activates C-3PO and tells him he's leaving. 3PO says, I wish you well, but I prefer if it had been a little bit more completed. And Anakin said, yeah, sorry, I wasn't able to give you more coverings, but it is what it is. I'll make sure Mom doesn't sell you or anything. To which C-3PO is a little bit alarmed by that. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time discussing this one segment other than to say I just love C-3PO and I love the indignities that he has to go through and suffer like no one suffers and all of that. But anyway, unless either one of you have something you want to say about that, I'm going to get us on to the next time that Anakin
I do have one thing.
Sure.
Actually, this is one of the only times in the George Lucas directed Star Wars where the camera is from the point of view of the character. When C-3PO is when he is responding or listening to Anakin talk as he's going together, getting his bag together, we see it from C-3PO's point of view, and it's one of the only times that it's done from a cinematography perspective. And I really would love to know why George Lucas did that, because I don't know, unless it was to make us feel again like, hey, remember this idea of C-3PO and R2-D2 telling this story? Maybe they're watching this happen, telling this story. It's his last time to see his master as a little boy, and then he's going to leave him and he's going to be all by himself. So this is really kind of a beautiful thing.
Oh, that's such a good point, and you're absolutely right, and I've always treasured that particular aspect of getting to see things through 3PO's eyes, and wow, that is such a cool idea to want to know that perspective. Now I want to know as well.
It'd been cool if we had like that perspective at the beginning of Attack, or not the beginning of Attack of the Clones, but when Anakin shows up at the Skywalker, at the Lars homestead in Attack of
Oh,
the Clones.
That would have been nice.
Yeah.
That would have been really nice.
Okay, so they're walking out the door, and Anakin stops and runs back to Shmi, and he says he just can't do it, and wants to know if he'll ever see her again. Her response is, "Well, what does your heart tell you?" And he says, "Yeah, I think so. I will." And then she goes, "Well, then we will." And he promises to come back and free her. And she tells him, like, now be brave and don't look back. Okay, this works so much better once you get Attack of the Clones that follows it up and you see the reunion or what there is of it. But Dan, what do you think about Anakin seeking a little bit of solace from his mother there before they depart?
I don't. This is what I think. I think Jake Lloyd got hammered, of course, as we all know, all too well, for his performance when he was just a kid. And when I watched this movie with my older boys, who are again out of the house now, I thought, this is exactly how my boys would act. This felt so authentic to me. And the fact that he's leaving, and when I first saw it in my 20s, I thought, why isn't he sad? Why isn't he crying? Why isn't he running back and hugging his mom? Why isn't he scared? Because at this point, fear does not dominate his life. This is about opportunity. And I still think as a child, he doesn't fully grasp what this means, what this entails. He's just looking at, I get to have a cool laser sword and I get to travel the galaxy and see space. How exciting. And it is exciting. He doesn't fully grasp it. And her strength and her emotions, and I really studied her face this time too. It's very hard for her, but she loves him so much, selfless love, love that is unconditional. That is just so admirable. It was this music that John Williams scored for this section used to haunt me so much for years and years. And whenever I would hear it, I would feel so incredibly sad. And I didn't really ever know why. And then I realized one day, well, it's because he left his mom. And when I was a kid, I had to be away from my mom for a little bit through like this stuff that happened in my life with a divorce situation. And I think it just triggered that in me. It's just really a beautiful, beautiful, powerful thing that really, really moved me. And before you shed any tears, I'm just fine. That was a long time ago. But yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, this scene gets me every time also. And you're right. Shmi is such a rock here, and that she doesn't know if she's ever going to see Anakin again, but she's letting him decide if that's something that he believes in, and truly puts that on him, and not in a bad way.
Right.
And just the whole don't look back. I mean, I think that was just as much for her as it was for him.
Yeah.
Because I know as a mom, I would probably want the same thing. Like, please, just don't look back. I don't want you to see me if I break down either.
Yeah.
Because
then he wouldn't have left. If she was a mess, he wouldn't have left.
Right.
It would have been 10 times. It's like when you drop your kids off for kindergarten or preschool and you have to be strong and they're so sad. Oh, it's the worst, but this is forever.
Or college.
Or college.
Yeah, okay.
The whole way home from college.
Oh,
indeed. Okay, so he does. He doesn't look back, and he accompanies Qui-Gon. We head to the desert. We see Darth Maul. He's waiting. One of his probes returns. He gets the report. He immediately jumps on a speeder bike and takes off. And this is immediately followed by a shot of the Queen's ship. Qui-Gon and Anakin are running towards it, and Qui-Gon seems to sense something, whips around, tells Anakin to drop just as Maul comes charging up behind him on his bike. Maul jumps off, ignites his saber, and it is on with Qui-Gon. And Anakin boards the ship, lets them know that Qui-Gon's in danger. Or I guess that's Panaka who tells everyone on the bridge. Ship flies low, Qui-Gon jumps aboard, and then Maul's left there to deactivate his saber. So, Dan, you got to talk about how the Duel of Fates was perhaps your favorite scene here in this movie. But talk a bit about Maul. What do you think about him?
Maul is, I wondered, like many people, is he the Phantom Menace? Because nobody knows who he is. Later, we sort of learn that it's Darth Sidious, but it could have easily have been Darth Maul, and the largeness of his face in the center above in the original theatrical poster made him to be such a presence, and he's hardly in it. And that has never bothered me for a second. I find that the villain, less is more. I've said forever, Darth Vader and Jaws are more effective when you don't see him a lot. And the same with Maul. It makes the ending when he finally shows up and unleashes his full power so much more effective, but you need a little bit of a tease, right? And that would get you going when you go to the theater. And it's such a great little sequence, and the fact that it's a challenge for Qui-Gon, because you just get the sense that Qui-Gon is very powerful force and strong in the force. And it's just a great moment. I really like Darth Maul. Of course, I like him so much more because of Clone Wars and Rebels, but this was really fun.
What do you think about that fight, Jay?
Oh, I always thought it was so cool. I mean, and my niece and I bonded over Darth Maul as well, just because he was always so, as you said, Dan, so mysterious and so feline in a lot of ways. And,
Interesting.
just that kind of serpentine, act that he does, especially when they're in Theed. But I've always loved Maul. I just always thought he was a fantastic villain. And
the
one
fight
little
holds up still, by the
Oh,
way.
yeah.
The effects, everything still holds up perfectly.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And it's definitely one of my favorite fights in all of Star Wars to this day.
Wow.
I mean,
Wow.
I definitely rank it up there in the top 5 for sure. But there's one thing about this scene, I have to say, just a quick aside, that I always used as a learning tool for my kids is when Qui-Gon tells Anakin to drop, he drops. He doesn't say, "What? Why? What am I do what?" He just drops. And I'm like, If mom tells you to do something, you do it. You don't ask why, because you could have your life at stake. Just do it."
It's true.
Do it now, ask questions later.
Exactly. So I always loved that scene for that reason.
All right, so Qui-Gon lands inside the ship, and Obi-Wan and Anakin come running in, and Obi-Wan asks, "What was it?" And Qui-Gon's response is, "I'm not sure, but it was well trained in the Jedi arts." And when Anakin asks him what they're going to do, he says, "We'll be patient." And then Qui-Gon introduces Anakin to Obi-Wan. So the beginnings of a beautiful relationship that goes bad. But I don't know. I liked you brought up Jake Lloyd's acting here, and it's not his fault. He's an 8-year-old, and
That's right.
it's much as a directorial or something like that. I don't know. There's something about that introduction I would like to have seen. The writing, or I don't know how to say this, but just like, "You're a Jedi too? Glad to meet you." I like the enthusiasm because he wanted to be a Jedi. He's excited to be part of this group going forward.
Sure.
But I don't know. I just would like to have seen something a little bit different there.
Interesting. I've always liked this part. I always
Have you?
found it to be really warm. I mean, that's what kids are like when they're little. You know that. Your kiddos were probably very similar. I don't know. I just feel like our boys all would have acted the same. Just this wonderful earnestness. They have a way of cutting right to the heart of the matter, and simple and beautiful. And I just thought it was cute. I feel like a kid would have done that. And plus, I like that it's understated. Anakin Skywalker meet Obi-Wan Kenobi. I remember seeing that in the trailer going, wow.
Here it is.
I even have goosebumps now. So I think it was beautifully understated and well performed.
Okay.
But that's just me.
Oh, yeah.
No, I agree with you. I think that my youngest one, we call him Colby 1 at my house anyway, but I think he would have definitely acted exactly like Anakin did in this particular instance.
All right, so the ship leaves Tatooine. Then we get a shot of Naboo at night. Newt Gunray is working with Sio Bibble. He's threatening him. You're going to die much sooner than your people, I'm afraid. And he's Seo's being defiant. He's telling him about the invasion's is going to give them nothing. They're democracy, and the people have decided. And then Sio Bibble's taken away. And then we learn that the battle droids are in position to begin searching the swamps for these ruined underwater villages. So it's as much of a narrative scene as anything to kind of let us know how things are developing on Naboo, that they aren't showing us the suffering in this case. They're telling us about it, which is fine. I don't need to see a whole bunch of people dying in the streets of Theed. And then we also learned, and this will set up later, that the Gungans are not to be found in their village, and that's why Jar Jar is going to be important when they get back to link everybody up
Right.
together. Either of you have any other thoughts on that transitional scene?
I just got the impression that he was lying. He was forced to say all these people were dying to make it seem worse, to force the Senate to act. I always found it to be part of a ruse. I don't know why I just remember thinking that, and even to this day.
I think even if it was true, he was forced to send the communication.
That's
No
for
doubt
sure.
about it.
Yes.
And because you must contact me. He knew that was a bad idea. That to establish the
Right.
connection trace.
To trick them.
Yeah. All right. So back on the Queen's starship, Padme enters a room. We see Jar Jar snoring in a chair. R2 seems to be in lower power mode. Padme plays the message we were just talking about and then shuts it off and turns around to see Anakin sitting in the corner looking pitiful because he's extremely cold in space. And of course, he comes from a warm planet. And then there is this touching scene. Anakin notices that she's sad. And then Padme's response is, well, Queen's worried. Her people are suffering and dying. And that's when Anakin gives the Japor snippet to her. And, give you good fortune. And she says, well, I don't need to remember this spy. Maybe things are going to change when we get to Coruscant, but my caring for you will remain. And then he says, well, I care for you too, only I. And then she fills in the blank, miss your mother. So some more relationship building between Padme and Anakin. Jay, what did you think of this scene? Especially, Anakin adjusting to having just left home.
Well, of course, there's a lot of people that have said that the cold, and even Yoda points this out, cold, fear, dark side, this is kind of thing. But I just played it off that the poor kid is cold. He does come from a warm planet. He's just left his mom. He's on a very cold starship. He's got this weird Gungan snoring next to him. He's all by himself. Nobody else is around. I would be cold too. But I think that the whole Japor snippet was super sweet. And of course, that plays a huge role later on with Padme. She's wearing it in Revenge of the Sith, and then she ends up being buried with it as well. So it is not just a trinket, it's a symbol. And it's a symbol of the beginnings of what eventually becomes their relationship. And so I've always treasured this particular scene for that reason.
And Dan, how about you?
I agree. The sentiment is there. It's a nice piece of exposition to try to establish the two having a connection. It's probably the most awkward moment between Anakin and Padme, but don't worry, friends. Episode 2 will give you many more.
It will indeed. But again, very, very developmentally appropriate awkwardness, though.
Oh, I agree. No, it's more that Natalie Portman doesn't space out suffering. She says suffering, dying, like it's one word. And I just wanted a little comma there. That's it.
Yes, as you should.
There we go. Okay. Yeah, I particularly like Anakin giving Padme the Japor snippet because
it's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, it's touching.
Symbolic.
And one of the best things Jake Lloyd does as Anakin in this movie is try to impress Padme.
Yep.
From when they are in Watto's shop and asks her if she's an angel, and then is bragging about how he's this pilot and someday he's going to fly away from there. And, when she's questioning his ability to finish a race, you're going to do it this time. Do what? Well, finish the race, of course. He's like, yeah, Kids was right. I'll do it this time. He's always trying to impress her here. And this time he comes up with a gift, which is a touching thing to do. So I just kind of like the way that if you put aside the teenager and an 8-year-old relationship, that they've been building this over the course of the movie.
Plus, what a nice thing to remind us that for all of his bravado and talents, he is still a child. And I love that he's cold, as you mentioned earlier, Jay, because it's a really nice character moment. It's a nice example of world building. Hey, someone who grows up on a warm planet, their blood's going to be a little bit thinner, so space is going to be extra cold for them. And there's also a little bit of scared that comes into that because he's not with anybody he really knows, so he might be shivering just from being a little bit afraid. It's really a nice piece of humanity, again, that I think is another example of how George Lucas is a really great storyteller, and sometimes you can do it in very subtle ways.
Agreed.
Well, then this brings us to our final part of the segment. The Queen's ship arrives at Coruscant. We get a number of great views of the planet throughout this portion of the movie. And as it's racing towards the platform, Rick Olay is going to Rick Olay and points out that this is Coruscant. The entire planet's just one big city. He's stating the obvious the way he does. And then they get to the platform and Senator Palpatine's waiting. And then Chancellor Valorum debarks from his shuttle. And Palpatine expresses his concern for Amidala and is glad that she's safe and she's there. And Palpatine makes introductions for Valorum, who is informed that he's called a special session of the Senate to hear her position. And Palpatine teases that there's a question procedure, but he's confident they can overcome it. And then Qui-Gon says, I got to speak to the Jedi as soon as possible. Anakin gets a little confused about what's supposed to do. He wants to go with Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, but he's being ushered off with Padme, the Queen, and Jar Jar. And they get on a board and take off. I got to ask you all about this line here in a second. Jar Jar's line, the Queen's being grossly nice of me, so think. Pity hot. Yeah. Anyway, so then we get more great views of Coruscant on going forward. So again, another good transitional scene that sets up things that are to come here. Before we get into Jar Jar's awkward line, no, I'm sorry. Let's just get that out of the way now. What does he mean? What is this pity hot business here? I never paid attention to this line until I was writing notes for this discussion here.
Same.
What's Jar Jar getting on about here?
I was going to rewind it and turn on the captions, but I didn't. It sounds like he's saying she's pretty hot, but I can't imagine that's the case. I just don't believe that's the case. So I don't know. It's just Jar Jar warble. I hope.
The only thing I can
turn on the
think
captions.
of, yeah,
and it's PITTY, pity hot,
pretty
and
hot.
that sounds like he is with an accent trying to say pretty hot. And is he talking about her? Is he talking about the situation? What is it? I
would assume it's a situation because
otherwise
he hasn't shown any kind of groin-centric state of mind.
I agree, but it just bugged me to no end when I watched it because I did. Back 10 seconds, just I was like,
right,
what is going on? So anyways, Jay, I'm sorry I interrupted you.
Oh no, you're totally fine. I just think it's kind of like saying, oh, that's the bomb, kind of a thing. That's like awesome, that's cool. Instead of saying, oh, that's cool, it's pretty hot.
Yeah,
that's the bomb. That's awesome.
I think the other thing that just occurred to me is that Anakin really wanted to go with Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, and he was very confused about who he was supposed to do. And then Padme is there like, Anakin, come on, and then Qui-Gon shoos him off. And I wonder if Jar Jar is just trying to like cheer him up, pep him up a little bit about the situation, if that's what that's meant to be. But we get our introduction to Chancellor Valorum and our first like really good look at Senator Palpatine here. And not a lot to go by, but what was your impression of them from this introduction, Dan?
It just reminds me of what a commanding performer Ian McDiarmid is, and the look on his face without any hint of irony, but just being a very regal, kind, sort of avuncular character. Just terrific. And poor Terrence Stamp, who's just such an awesome Shakespearean actor who loathed being in this movie and could not stand George Lucas's style of direction. How out of place he looks in his performance, which is too bad because Terrence Stamp was awesome. But I think it's just great because we know who Ian McDiarmid is going to be. And I do want to give a shout out for Rick Olay. I wouldn't say I'm a Rick Olay fan. I think I'm ambivalent to him, But him pointing out, hey, this is a planet of cities.
Hmm.
I love that because I feel like for a kid who's only grown up on the desert, this would blow his mind.
Mhm.
So of course you would explain it to a child. I really kind of like that.
Mhm.
Oh, of course. That's just the ongoing joke that, when they're escaping
Sure.
Tatooine, oh, the shield is down, the hyperdrive's down, that droid fixed
Yeah.
it. That narrating for us the things that we can see.
He's the stage manager in the play, basically.
Right. The Terrence Stamp, I once read an interview, and he was really disappointed, as you were pointing out, Dan, with the way this worked out, because he was looking forward to working with Natalie Portman. She
Mhm.
wasn't even on set that day when they did
Oh,
this
no.
scene. And if I remember this correctly, it was essentially a mop with some eyeballs on it so that he
Oh,
could
Probably.
knew where to look at that time. And that he was really disappointed by that entire experience. But Jay, what did you think about this last segment?
Well, as Dan pointed out, I think, for Rick Ollier, he was doing exactly what Dan said. This is a one big city. And you could also tell that Anakin was just looking up at all the different buildings and everything that was going on around him. And he was just in awe. And again, I was just impressed with Anakin's maturity in the fact that, he knew to kind of look back at Qui-Gon and say, like, okay, like, what am I supposed to do? Like, just with hand gestures.
Mhm.
He didn't stand there and go, what am I supposed to do? He was able to communicate that in what I thought was actually a pretty mature way. And, even though he did get ushered off.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, that brings us then to the end of the segment. Either one of you have any other final thoughts on this portion of the film before I start to wrap things up?
It's just a nice build-up. There's a nice exposition, some promises of some dangers to come. It's just a really well presented story. It's a nice story, really well told.
Mm-hmm. I
All
can't
right.
say it any better than that. So I think it's a great place to stop.
Well, Dan, thanks so much for coming back and joining us here on Podcast Stardust. It's always a pleasure to have. We'll get those measurements for your gold jacket and get that out to you as soon as we can.
Thank you.
Your podcast is one that I'm pretty sure most of my listeners know because we have a considerable amount of crossover. But for those that may not be familiar, why don't remind everybody where they can find Coffee with Kenobi and tell them a little bit more about some of your Star Wars books as well.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both so much. It really is a joy to be able to come back on the show because, Podcast Stardust has such a great reputation for just love for the franchise and just the intelligent conversation with two charming hosts. So thank you so much. Coffee with Kenobi you can find weekly anywhere you can listen to podcasts. We're all over social media. You can go to the website, coffeewithkenobi.com. We've got a really exciting cruise coming up next summer, June 16th to 20th. We're going on the Disney Wish, which has a Star Wars lounge, which, Dennis, I know you've gotten to experience before. And we've got people signed up from all over the globe, including Australia. So we're very excited. If you're interested in a no cost, no obligation quote, go to coffeewithkenobi.com/Disney Wish, and you can find the Star Wars books I've written on Amazon or anywhere that you find books, and the Star Wars Encyclopedia, which I was honored to be a part of, is coming out, I believe, November 15th. So look for that. It'd be a nice addition for under your Christmas tree.
Absolutely. Dan, always a pleasure. And it's always so great to get to talk to you because we don't get to talk to you that often anymore. So it's wonderful to reconnect. So thank you so much for the kind words as well.
Absolutely. Thank you both.
All right. And there you have it. That was Dan Zehr. It's good to have him back. It's been a while since you know what? In fact, last time he was on the show was last July for segment 7 of Return of the Jedi is what we did that year. But that was a show you weren't able to make because I think it was one of our dreaded weather Thursdays that we were experiencing back then.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah. So it's been literally forever since I've gotten a chance to talk to Dan. So it was great to get back on the mic with him. As always, always brings such amazing insights.
Yeah. And of course, a lot of our exposure to podcasting and being part of that world is thanks to Coffee with Kenobi. So it was always fun to get to talk to him a bit, especially it's our show. Have him come over here and be our guest for a change. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's kind of our origin story, if you will.
Indeed. All right. Well, with that, I just want to thank you all for joining us for this episode of Podcast Stardust and this entry in our ongoing series covering the Phantom Menace. We hope you've enjoyed it. And if you did, make sure you've hit subscribe to the podcast on your podcast of choice if you haven't done so already. And you will get this next installment when it shows up next month, as well as all of our other shows that we do. Jay has a monthly show called World Between Worlds, where she rounds up Star Wars fashion and lifestyle products. We have the news almost every single week. We've been covering the Acolyte for the past 8 weeks. The new shows that come on, we discuss those. We get into the books, we get into comics. We talk a little bit of everything Star Wars here on Podcast Stardust. And you can find our entire catalog of shows over on retrozap.com, which is also home to the entire network. So you've got Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Case Files, Animaniacast, Brews and Blasters, Dork Lair, Doomcast, Enjoy Stuff, Love, Death, and Robots Plus, Superhero Suite, and of course my other podcast, Warp Trails. We also are very appreciative of your ratings and reviews. That's a great way to help the show grow. And if you could do that on Apple Podcasts, that's even better way of helping the show grow. And then when you all share the show on social media with your friends, that is very much appreciated by us. It really does get the word out amongst the podcasting community and help people find us. So with all those things having been said, Jay, remind everybody where we are on social media and some other homes on the internet.
Sure, very easy to do. We are very conveniently found at Podcast Stardust on all of your social media outlets, including Instagram, Facebook, and X. And we also have tons of Pinterest boards over on that particular outlet. And we have 2 of our YouTube channels, the traditional YouTube as well as YouTube Music. So head on over to both of those, like, subscribe, and share those out. And those also support reviews and comments. So we'd love to hear your feedback. And I know Spotify also is that way as well, where you can leave reviews and interact as well. So please head over to all of those things. And if you're up for some real-time chatter, we do have a Discord room on the RetroZap Discord server, where we are just one of many different rooms. All of the different RetroZap shows that Dennis ran down just a little bit ago also have their own Discord rooms. So if you want to get in on that, just hit up the link in our show notes. And we also have a TeePublic store. So if you are in need of any new Podcast Stardust swag, so you can get everything from t-shirts, sweatshirts, tote bags, home goods, and everything in between. And every purchase does help to support the show. So if you'd like to pick something up, we'd love to see that out in the wild. So make sure you snap a picture of that and tag us on one of our social media outlets. And we'd love to share that as well. So the link to that is in our show notes. And then one last thing, we are still partnering with Saber Masters, where you can pick up one of a bazillion different battle-ready lightsabers to your liking. So whether you are a Jedi or a Sith or sometimes in between, you can pick from one of several different designs available over there. And the link to that will be in our show notes. And if you do happen to pick anything up, make sure you put in the code STARDUST at checkout, and that will earn you an extra $10 off of your purchase and also helps to support the show. So with that, Dennis, why don't you let everybody know what you've got going on in your other podcasting adventures, any guest spots coming up, or anything else that you'd like to share out?
I don't have a whole lot going on right now in other podcasts. My wife and I are the host of Warp Trails, which I mentioned just a second ago. It is our podcast devoted to Star Trek, more specifically the shows that have been on Paramount Plus. So Discovery, Lower Decks, Picard, and Strange New Worlds. We are waiting for the 5th and final season of Lower Decks to start. And once that happens, we'll have some new episodes out for y'all. And you can find that show exclusively on the RetroZap Podcast Network. And right now, the best place to find the past episodes would be on retrozap.com. Jay, you've been keeping busy as usual with cosplay. So what is the latest?
I have indeed. So over on my Instagram, which is at j.snipscosplay, you can catch all of my different cosplay iterations of Ahsoka, 2 different versions of Hera, the 4th sister from the Kenobi series, my original concept Mandalorian, as well as some other fun things as well. So if you want to head over there, it's a great community. Again, that's at j.snipscosplay.
All right. Upcoming on the show on Friday, hope is to get into Star Wars news. We just don't know if there's going to be any at the time of this recording. So we may do something else, but it could be a surprise. So make sure you join us and find out. Then on Monday, we are getting back to the High Republic with a discussion of Tessa Gretton's Temptation of the Force. And I got a lot to say about that book. So make sure you join us for that one. But with that having been said, thanks for listening to episode 759 of Podcast Stardust, everyone. Have a great rest of your week. And until next time, may the Force be with you.